Magbabago Duterte.
I, Rodrigo Roa Duterte,
Your concern is human rights. Mine is human life. Shoot them dead.
order bago ni Mayor. Di lang daw mo patyon. Kung silo na mo bisong, wala na bisong, wala na may silbi.
Mahirap kayo. Magtiis kayo sa hirap at gutom. Wala akong pakialam.
Parang alipin po tayo ng China. Parang wala tayong karapatan sa sarili natin. Sa upan.
I just simply love Xi Jinping. He understood, he understands my problem, and is willing to help. And I'd like to say thank you, China.
Ikaw, ABS-CBN, I will see to it that you're out. There's nothing really to be extra scared of that coronavirus thing.
We were excellent. Na-control po natin ang pagkalat ng sakit.
The Philippines' total COVID-19 caseload reaches 1 million Monday, as the Health Department logs 8,929 new confirmed infections.
Maliit na bagay ito sa buhay natin. Marami tayong dinaanan, mas grabe, mas mahirap, mas na magluluha ngayon. Gusto ko nang umiyak sa harap ninyo.
Hindi lahat may ayuda, hindi lahat nakakakuha ng sapat na ayuda. Gutom yung mga Pilipino and kailangan natin magkaroon ng action.
Wala lang isip yung mga gagawin yan. What they just do is just to show to the people that they care, but they do not really care because of their ignorance.
Dapat hindi masamain ng gobyerno dahil tumutulong na nga sila eh. Tapos binibigyan pa nila ng ibang kahulugan.
Pagbulag ka na, no? Hindi mo na di-differentiate ang liwanag sa dilim.
Hello, I'm Vicopin and you are watching Rappler. In just 7 months, we are going to make a decision that will dictate where the Philippines goes. A lot is at stake in the 2022 elections, and on Rappler, our message is clear. We want you, us actually, the voter, to be the hero in this story. Back in 2016, our hashtags for the election was hashtag the leader I want. This time, we want to highlight you, the voter. Hashtag we decide atin ang Pilipinas highlights our duty to reclaim our country because we believe and we know that we can help reclaim our country by voting. And what better way to prepare for the craziness of the 2022 elections, actually ngayon pa lang medyo may konting crazy na, than by asking questions. Welcome to PH Vote Dialogues. This episode of PH Vote Dialogues is organized by Rappler Civic Engagement Arm Move PH in partnership with the Friedrich Newman Foundation for Freedom, and it is also co-presented by You Vote Iloilo, Global Shapers Iloilo Hub, We the Future PH, Ateneo Highlights, University of Caloocan City, The New Crossroads, Pangasinan Youth for DRRM, Amateur Media Association of Philippine Scouts, Legal Network for Truthful Elections, and University of San Jose Recoleto Supreme Student Council. We are also live on Facebook and cross-posted to Move PH's partner social media pages, Election 2022 Coalition, Good Gov PH, Simulan Natin 2022, Caloocan Young Leaders Initiative, We the Youth Vote, Now You Know, College of Arts and Sciences Student Council, Council for People's Development, I Defend, Suki Network, and the Student Council Alliance of the Philippines. So ano ba ang PH Vote Dialogues? We bring together veteran journalists, experts, Rappler's own editorial team, thought leaders from different fields, and you, the viewer, wherever it is that you're watching from, Zoom, if you're in the Zoom call, if you're watching via Facebook or YouTube, because we want to understand each other better. So, candidacies have been filed, although sa totoo lang, they will only be truly finalized on November 15. That's the deadline for substitution by withdrawal. So, if you, like me, have been living on social media, that's both a good and bad thing, you'll know that there's been a lot of noise online. We'll try to cut through that noise tonight. Tonight, we will be helping you make a list, a checklist to be specific, that will help you make an informed choice on May 9, 2022. So, where do you even begin when looking for a good leader? Paano ba mag-engage sa ating mga kapamilya, kaibigan, kakilala, kahit mga strangers on the internet, na productive at hindi ka naman masisiraan ng bait ng tuluyan? We want to keep our sanity. Joining me in today's conversation is Positive Youth Development Network Incorporated Chief Youth Mobilizer John Carlo Borja. Hello, Borj. We also have vlogger and content creator Janina Vela. Hello, Janina. And Rappler columnist and editorial consultant John Neri. Hello, Sir John. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them as a comment on Facebook via the YouTube stream, or if you're part of this Zoom webinar, you can leave a question in the chat box or use the Q&A function, and then we'll check them out later. But please remember, guys, be nice, play nice. Okay, so voters reg for 2022 is ending in a few days. It's October 27, so 30, on the 30th, matatapos na. So look back tayo ng slide. Kailan ka unang nagpa-register to vote, and what was the experience like? I think let's start with Borj. When did you first register to vote?
I first registered to vote nung 2016 pa. I was 18 back then. So, yun yung kauna-unahan kong experience sa voter registration.
Ano yung feeling? Was it exciting? Was it stressful?
It wasn't
back then?
stressful back then, Bea. Pero I have to be honest, nagparehistro ako noon dahil scholar ako ng probinsya namin. So that was actually the reason why I registered. So parang required kami na magpa-register kasi nga scholar kami ng probinsya. And then the process wasn't really hassle at all. So parang konti lang kasi yung nagpapa-register na kabataan na parang hindi rin naman siya masyadong big deal sa amin way back then. And gaya nga sa akin din personally, it wasn't a big deal. Siguro if it wasn't required dun sa scholarship, I wouldn't have registered back then. So yun to be honest yung experience ko while registering.
Buti na lang pala required ka dati pa lang.
Yeah.
Janina, what was your experience like? And when did you first register to vote?
Nung 2016, I barely made it. I didn't make it. I was 17 years old.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
You are very young.
Yeah, we don't have to do the math. It's okay. Pero gumawa ako ng video about elections noon, but it was very different from my content now, no? But I remember I registered to vote in 2019. That was a very monumental and pivotal time in my city, our city, Pasig, because there was a political dynasty of 27 years. And suddenly there was this beacon of hope for change that it was really a no-brainer for me to have to register for the very first time. So I remember going to City Hall. Yun nga po, wala masyadong tao. Syempre, medyo mahaba yung pila, mahaba yung wait a little, but nowhere near as crazy as it is now. Kasi parang may groupmate ako kahapon, nag-line up siya, whatever, 2 a.m. Tapos she didn't make our group meeting at 2 p.m. Parang ganon. So super iba na, no? But I remember that first time I voted kasi iba yung feeling pagdating ko sa remote voting site. Kasi everybody parang nakangiti, everybody was very hopeful, everybody was very excited, very kind, and alam mo yung iba talaga yung feeling when there's hope. Pero, syempre, alam naman natin po yung ending ng story na yun, nanalo po ang binoto natin. And but I remember my senatorial candidates. So first time I voted, I did not even reach the 12. I was not even able to vote or choose 12 people. I think nasa 10 or 11 pa lang ako. Because alam niyo na yun. Pero I remember voting for my mayor and watching him win. And I remember voting for 11 senatorial candidates and watching them all lose. Lahat po sila natalo. And it was hilarious. Well, obviously at that point it wasn't. But I think when I looked at those two turnouts, one thing or two things were instilled in me. It was one, that there is hope. May pag-asa ang Pilipinas. May pag-asang mabago pa rin ang naratibo natin dito sa lipunan natin. Pero maraming pang kailangan gawin. There's still a
Interesting
lot
point
to be
that you
done.
raised about abstaining. Kasi ako rin, share ko lang, nung una akong bumoto in the 2010 elections, dahil madrama ako, I did leave one major national post blank. For my own sanity and protection, I will leave out which position I left blank in 2010. But Sir John, kamusta naman? Will you allow me to ask what year you first registered to vote?
Sure. It was back in the Middle Ages. If I remember correctly, it was for the 1984 Batasan Pambansa elections.
Wow.
And I have not missed a single election since then. It was very important to my generation, and I think I can also sense that in the current generation. But even though I did not miss a single election, because of Comelec rules, I had to re-register in 2016. And no surprise, I ended up registering on the very last day. So I was, my wife and I were in Lahain. We were there so early, and it took us the whole day. We were in Quezon City Hall. And of course, we were kicking ourselves. And why did we, take so much time and so on? Of course, it was a relief to actually finish it. But, for one reason or another, we could not make it until that last day. So I do share, all the frustrations now about having to re-register. And although I think we have 3 more days left, right?
Yeah.
For the extended registration period.
Yeah.
So there.
And they did open new ways to reactivate your voter status. You can do it online now.
Yes, that's right.
Via Zoom, which I actually tried recently. Okay, kasi napag-usapan din natin, di ba, yung sobrang haba ng pila. Of course, the context this year being na a bulk of the time that we would have had to register to vote for 2022 was during the pandemic. Syempre sa iba't ibang lugar ng Pilipinas, may iba't ibang mga alert. How did you feel when you saw these dramatic pictures? And when I say dramatic, I'm not exaggerating. Kasi talagang people would line up at like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, just to get a slot to register to vote for 2022. So what did you guys feel when you saw these videos and images of, and even your friends, di ba, mga kwento ng mga kaibigan nyo na, grabe, 5 oras na ako nakapila dito para mag-register to vote. Whoever wants to go. Maybe Borge wants to go first?
Alright, thank you, Bea, for that. Ako ngayon ay isang SK chairperson sa barangay namin dito sa Kalumpang, sa Binangonan, Rizal. And we have this flagship project called Boto Ko Ambag Ko, where a part of it is to actually assist voters. So we've assisted more than 10,000 voters to register. And it wasn't a hearsay, it was part of my experience. Kasama ako pumila ng mga kabataan namin ng I think 3 a.m. na madaling araw just for us to get slots. Tapos pagdating namin, naubusan na kami kasi nag-cut off na. It was a big mess. Parang I really felt bad because it's our right and responsibility, di ba? And it should be given to us like in the best way possible. Like hindi ka dapat pumipila ng mahaba, hindi ka dapat naghihintay ng gabi pa lang para makakuha ng slots. And given now that the pandemic is still here with us, I think dapat nagkaroon ng mas magandang proseso kung paano magiging mas maayos yung sistema. Kasi if it wasn't that smooth before the pandemic, lalo na ngayon, and lalo na nakita ng mga Pilipino yung importansya ng pagboto. As much as I see it now sa young people namin dito sa barangay, I've seen them and I've heard them saying that they want to register because they believe that their votes really count. And that's different from how I started voting and registering in 2016. So sabi ko, shucks, ito yung rason kung bakit hangaba ng pila. Ito yung rason kung bakit ang daming kabataan ang lumalabas ng maaga at ng madaling araw para lang magparehistro. I felt bad because I think the process could have been better and it should not have been this bad for all of us na makapagparehistro dapat sa mas maayos at mas decenteng pamamaraan.
Tsaka to add to that, syempre, di ba, may pandemya pa rin. I mean, kahit papano, may kaba and risk factor when you go out and, expose yourself in line for several hours. Janina, nakwento mo nga kanina, a friend of yours, how many hours did they wait to register to vote?
I haven't done the math for that one, but then I have friends talaga not 10 hours plus. I have
10!
Yeah, I have a friend nga, he tried 4 to 5 times. Kaya nung sinabi ni Borge na kailangan natin ng disenteng paraan, yung kinuwento niya, parang nandun siya ng 2 a.m., tapos sabi nila hindi siya pwedeng pumila sa harap ng mall, kailangan nasa labas. Tapos pag 5 a.m. or something, whatever time, lahat daw sila tatakbo to line up. Para talagang Hunger Games na I don't know, it's such I don't want to use the word disgrace, but then kung yun nga election, ito yung foundation ng democracy natin. Ito yung isa sa mga fundamental parts of what our forefathers fought for, the right to be heard and for your opinion to matter and your voice to matter. Bakit ang daming hakbang? Or kailangan madaming hakbang pero unnecessarily may ang daming unnecessary steps and systems that make it impossible for you to be heard, that make it like parang ang daming turn-offs in a sense. For you to exercise your right of suffrage, which is very interesting kasi for a country that is supposed to be for the people, by the people, with the people, parang why are you making it so difficult for that to actually live out, for that definition, that meaning of democracy to be lived out? Ang daming hakbang and it's frustrating.
Yeah, hindi kasi dapat torture idealists. Sir John, what is going through your head?
Yeah, I actually accompanied my son who had just turned 18 when he registered under the previous deadline for September 30. And we went out at 3 in the morning, about 2 in the morning to fall in line. My son actually recommended that we go there on a previous night just to see what it was like. So we went, we saw, and that first night, it was even worse. So it was outside a Robinson's Mall, and there was a long line of people. And they were there for hours before the line into the mall actually was allowed to form. But when we went for his actual turn, we were very grateful to the security people of that Robinson's Mall because they designed the system. So people went there at 2 in the morning and so on, and they somehow fashioned the system where they gave slips of paper with numbers, to the people in line and said, you can go home, those of you who can go home, and just come back at, I think, 5 a.m. And then we will follow that sequence. It sounds so basic, right? I mean, it's like registration in UP or other schools. But it helped a lot.
Yeah.
However, I do agree with Janina's point and Borges' point also. And I think the reason why it's so bureaucratic is because we've unfortunately have had a history of voter fraud. especially before automated elections. So there was a whole series of attempts to make sure that the people who could actually vote have been vetted. But I think two things. One, we've had automated elections since, I don't know, 2010. I think 3 or 4 elections already. Yeah. We've had very good experience with that. And that has cut down on that type of voter fraud. And second, there's so much technology available already to make it so much easier. Register, I don't know, by SMS or something, that maybe really this should be the last time we should, see this, scenes of people lining up. I mean, sure, it warms the heart. Wow, people are there for democracy. But at the same time, it's so frustrating. I mean, we're smart people. I mean, why does it have to be this way?
Yeah. Hopefully, well, I mean, the very fact na yung online reactivation, di ba, parang ngayon lang for this
That's right.
Cycle of elections lang nila na implement. And I think they're just pilot testing online voting. So we're kind of behind, but hopefully after, COMELEC, after the 2022 elections, that's something that COMELEC definitely has to work on, and we should be pressuring them. So pakinote, next discussion natin, let's talk about that also. So in 3 days, and tapos na yung pag-extend ng voters registration. So let's say registered ka na or reactivated na yung voters reg mo. It's time to choose. So how do you even begin? Siguro we can start with Sir John. How do you even sort through everything that you see online? I mean, Rappler pa lang, ang dami ng article, ang dami ng resources, right? And then you go on Twitter, may mga thread, may mga kung ano-anong info dyan. Like, where do you start?
Well, it helps that I've had some experience with elections. So I've seen for myself, how some politicians can make pie in the sky promises, and we get neither the sky nor the pie that was promised to us. So a big part of it is really we need to be better judges of character. Having said that, every moment in history, I think, has its own demands. So there are certain leaders that we need at certain times in the life of our country. And at other times, maybe they might not recommend themselves to us. So it's also important for us to understand exactly what we're going through. Of course, it's difficult, but I think the more information we have, the more we try to engage with our present, I think we will have a better idea of the kind of leaders that we need. Maybe I can just say that even though I tend to be a little cynical because of decades worth of voting, I still do think that in the end, my idea of leadership is very idealistic, in which is leadership is all about possibility. A good leader allows us to do what's possible, and a great leader allows us to imagine new possibilities. So every moment in history presents us with new problems and so on, and we need to be able to find that leader or that set of leaders who can awaken in us the sense of the possible and also allow us to imagine a whole new world.
Yeah. It's really giving space for hope and dreaming, which is hard to come by, especially the past 2 years under lockdown, and for a lot of people the past 5 years also. Janina, like a lot of us here, like you can't really tune out of the internet as easily as other people, perhaps. Like you're very much a person of the internet and social media. What helps you make sense of what you see and what you read online, or what helps you filter through the noise?
Bouncing off from Sir John's idea of judging the characters of the politician, or like we have to be better judges of character. I feel like we actually need to learn to even just judge first. Kasi feeling ko we're not even there yet as a nation na we're still being led by a lot of personality politics, by a lot of last names, by a lot of maybe even false promises, where I feel like we have to break these people apart in our minds, break apart their sentences, every single statement, even if they're already in your list of preferences. We have to really question every single thing that we see online, which opo nakakapagod po talaga yon. And it's a sacrifice that we have to make good decisions, because good decisions can't be made in haste. Good decisions can't be made na okay, I saw this person post this, pwede na. Of course not. And so taking every single article, what I did nung 2019 po, I would see a name on my Twitter feed, I'll put it in my notes, and and then send articles to my DMs on Twitter, para later I can really read all of them, watch all of the videos, research on them, na hindi lang nakabase sa headlines, hindi lang nakabase sa infographics, even just infographics were not enough for me. Kasi ang dami ng passes, I think, of people. Because what happens is people are subjective. You can't help it. I mean, as much as news outlets don't try to be, these are still humans. So I like to go infographic. What was the reference for that infographic? What was the reference for that article? And then go back to the main source mismo, where it's as objective as possible, and even questioning that. So I think it's really taking everything into account, unpacking every single thing that I see, and not taking things just at face value.
Right. I always tell people that even if I'm from Rappler, and even when we say, diba, okay, like if you're looking for sources, make sure they're reputable news organizations or whatever. Like even if it's from Rappler, I still double check and I look for other sites, like what's their angle, what's their take on this. It's healthy skepticism, I think. No?
Yeah.
Hindi naman na wala akong tiwala sa sarili kong kumpanya, but I think it's healthy to like as a discipline, as an exercise. Borge, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, because I think that's also important when looking at the sources, because you'll read one headline and you'll assume that it's true, but then what are other news sites saying about this? What are other sources saying about this? What are our other thought leaders saying about this? Is also very important, because yung nangyayari, diba, we're against people who are closed-minded. Yeah. Pero tayo rin nagiging close-minded without us even noticing. So I think it's important that we have a wide variety also of voices in our head. And then you decide for yourself at the end of the day. At least, hindi lang, one flavor lang yung information na meron ka. But may buffet ka, you're making yourself aware of all of the different foods that are there. And you decide what you want to take.
Right. That's a good metaphor. Borge, you were saying kanina you've had experience, right? Sa barangay level, di ba, parang engaging with people, helping them vote. How do you, and that speaks of like going beyond online, kasi so far in discussion natin, mostly online pa lang. How do you make sense of that? Kaso like, I don't wanna, not to make light of this, pero yun nga, yung term na marites, di ba? Yung, we are all mariteses deep inside, di ba? Parang ang daming sinasabi ng mga tao online, offline din, mga tao na nakaka-interact natin. How do you make sense? How do you personally make sense of everything that, comes your way, all the information that comes your way?
First, sobrang lawak kasi ng reach ng social media, and not everything that are posted in social media are being fact-checked before they even reach a wider audience, diba? So nasa atin talaga na recipients ng mga information yung responsibility to actually fact-check and really look onto the legitimacy of the sources and yung mga history or facts that are being stated there. So ako, I researched, interested ako palagi sa history ng mga candidates. So that's the first thing I do to filter out candidates. Paano sila napunta sa posisyon nila right now? Who were the people na tumulong sa kanila? What were their platforms back then? Kasi I believe na yung proseso ng pagpunta mo dun sa current position mo, it speaks volume about your principles, about the way you do things, ganyan. So sa amin din dito sa barangay, when we go beyond social media or like off social media, kapag nagpunta ka na on ground, you'll hear a lot of people na hindi pa rin pala familiar dun sa mga information na ito. For example, just a recent experience ko dito sa barangay namin, when we ask people if alam ba nila kung ano yung mga positions that they will be voting for in the 2022 elections, most of them told us na presidente, vice-presidente, they don't even know na meron pala kaming mayors, and councilors, senators, and they don't even know the differences between their responsibilities, between their mandates. So importante din talaga, especially sa atin na sa amin, halimbawa nakikita ko yung sarili ko, I position myself as someone na kailangan mas mag-research para mas may ma-share ako sa mga tao and mas alamin kung ano yung katotohanan para at least when I encounter it at the grassroots level, meron akong kakayahan na itama or i-share yung tamang impormasyon sa mga tao. So I think yun, very important sa akin yung pag-filter and pag-research ng history or ng background ng mga candidates. And at the same time, after it, I align yung mga candidates na align sa values and principles ko as a person. Parang ganun ko siya ginagawa.
Okay. I want to read off a comment. I just want to ask permission. You can chat later if it's okay if I say your name. Pero nag-share nga siya na nakakahiya daw yung unang beses siya nag-vote. You can hate me for that. Gusto ko lang sabihin na no, hindi naman kailangan kang i-hate if you didn't think through your first time voting. I think what's important is you're here, not literally here, no, pero you're here and starting to think deeper about the vote that you're gonna make come May 9, 2022. So don't feel bad, don't feel guilty. Hindi kasi lahat may opportunity din, di ba, na magsaliksik at mag-research ng maayos in the lead up to an election. Pero ito na yung chance natin. Sir John, nabanggit mo nga kanina, di ba, yung the importance of character. Now, as someone who's covered the elections before, parang ano rin yun, di ba? Parang part of a presidential campaign, for example, is creating this character, creating this persona of the candidate. And you have, comms experts doing that, PR experts doing that. So if as a voter, like, how do you make sense of that? Like, how do you know na parang, this is basically how the candidate is just packaging himself, themselves, herself? Or ito yung tunay na character ng taong ito na gustong nag-a-apply na maging pangulo or vice president or senator?
Again, I think it's also a function of the historical moment. So I think what Duterte has forced us to recognize is that this generation of voters is looking for authenticity. Whether in fact Duterte is really as authentic as he seems to be, it's another thing. But authenticity is a rather modern value. That wasn't what people like Marcos ran on before, right? So in their time, so I wasn't old enough to vote for Marcos, but I was around when he was there. And that generation of politicians, they were all terrific orators, all right? So that was one of the things that people were looking for. If you've heard Raul Manglapos speak, if you've heard Marcos speak for hours on end, it was something, I don't know, of course it wasn't written, there was no memo, but I think people just sort of thought, we want our leader to be able to set the house on fire just with his words. So that was one value. Now, fast forward back to our time, it seems that authenticity, even after 5 years under Duterte, is still a very powerful value. It seems like people really want to say, okay, totoong tao ba yan? And okay, so if that's one of the most important values now, okay, let's use that as a lens with which to see all the candidates. You're right. There is some packaging that goes on into every candidacy. So you will need to know, and you can only do this not just by spending time in one platform or one medium. You need to be able to engage other platforms, other mediums, talk to people, go out. We need to see how these people are in different settings to see how they interact. There are senators running for higher office. Senate reporters have covered them for years. If you have a chance to ask these Senate reporters for their candid impressions of these people, you might come away with a a more accurate impression of that particular person. I don't know if I'm making sense, but part of the value system that's in play, so to speak, is a matter of the historical moment. Right now, one of them is authenticity. We're looking for that. But in order for us to actually judge whether that value is practiced by a particular candidate, we have to see that candidate in as many settings, in as many different settings as possible.
Yeah. Naalala ko lang, sir, yung latest column mo for Rappler, yung talking about the presidential debates. I think that's one platform in which makikita mo yung authenticity, quote-unquote, ng isang kandidato kasi yun, sila lang mag-isa sa stage. Walang, di ba, there's no team to temper them if they need to be tempered. There's no team to hand them. Yes, sir.
That's right. Yeah, if I could, no? So yeah, that's my column for yesterday. And I talked about, for instance, the Cebu debate. It was held in a small hall in UP Cebu, much smaller than expected. And the tension was really palpable. Galit yung mga tao doon. I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised if people started throwing the monoblock chairs. It was that tense. So it was really impressive to see how someone like Duterte was able to calm things down with his jokes, with his very sensible suggestions. Kaya ninisip ko nga, wow, this guy has it. No, I mean, and I think that's what happened afterwards. So yeah, it was very different to see him. Of course, I also saw him in his Thanksgiving rally in Davao, where he was cursing a reporter and a reporter's wife and so on in front of 500,000 people. Iba rin yung personality niya.
Yeah. Janina and Borge, whoever wants to go first, we were talking about, the values. For you personally, what values are you looking for? Kasi I think like Sir John was able to define din, di ba, parang kumbaga yung milieu ngayon that people are looking for someone authentic. Perhaps not relatable, part din ba yun, sir? Sa authenticity yung relatability, or parang separate characteristic din yun altogether from authenticity?
I don't know, it could be part of it, yes.
Yeah. So, parang yun, given na yun yung parang seemingly hinahanap ng Filipino voter ngayon, like beyond that, like what values do you personally hold dear to you when picking the next leaders of the country? Maybe Janina, you can go first.
I think top of mind is integrity, which is very connected to authenticity. Not only that, I think it takes authenticity to the next level where it's not just authentic in terms of who you are as a person. You understand them in different lights, in different stages. But I think integrity is also who you are when no one's looking, right? That's kind of the definition of integrity, or what happens behind closed doors. And so I think part of that is honesty. Part of that is whether or not the person lies to get ahead, cheats to get ahead, steals, has a background of maybe court cases of stealing, even with so many people questioning. Even that, I think we have to take into account how many times people have questioned this person's integrity. Because kung solid talaga yung integrity ng tao, why should it always be in question? I don't know. That's just a thought that I have now. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that are important to me. Integrity, as well as how their service is. Something that I saw in the 2019 national elections is that after people lost, I saw two types of people. I see one type of person who will throw fit, not accept defeat, and just spend the last few years focusing on that loss and not be moving forward. But then I also see some people who took that loss and still served anyway, even without the title. And I think that's also another facet of integrity, is serving even if you don't have a title, serving even if you don't have the seat that you want, the platform that you want. I believe that true public servants create their own platforms. They have the ability to create their own mediums for service. And it doesn't matter whether or not it's in an in City Hall or Malacanang. But I think that's what a true public servant is. Will serve the public regardless of their title.
Borge, as a public servant yourself, what values do you hold dear when choosing a leader?
Top of mind is the capacity to stand firm to the principles and values that are right and just and for the general welfare of the public. Sobrang importante ito na nakita ko sa pagpasok sa politics because maraming politicians or even public servants na magaling, na mahusay, pero dahil hindi tumatayo sa kanilang prinsipyo, nadadaya at nakakain ng sistema. Yun yung worst thing that could happen. Matalino ka, yes. You have all the credentials that you need. You possess all those excellences that we're talking about. But once kainin ka ng sistema and you cannot firmly stand for your principles and values, doon nagsa-start yung pag-compromise ng sarili mo at pagpasok mo dun sa maling pamamaraan at maling pamamalakad na embedded dun sa political structure ng bansa natin. I'm also looking for a candidate na merong 3K at ito din yung parang campaign ko actually nung tumakbo ako sa SK. I'm looking for kaalaman, kakayahanan, karanasan. Kaalaman, basically the knowledge about the mandates, the responsibilities. Maraming kandidato yung tumatakbo pero hindi na alam kung ano yung alam mo yun, handa kaming mangampanya pero hindi sila prepared kapag naupo na kasi hindi nila alam kung ano talaga yung tinatakbuhan nila. 'Di ba? We've seen a lot of senators now na wala man lang naipasang batas but yeah, we still think that they are good but basically hindi naman yun yung trabaho nila. I'm also looking for another K, yung kakayahan, the capacity to translate these knowledge into actual actions, the capacity to listen, the capacity to create meaningful and inclusive policies and programs for the people. And lastly, yung karanasan, which talks about the experience, the track record, ano na yung nagawa ng kandidato. Dito kasi nanggagaling yung abilidad natin na makiramay at makinig sa communities. Gusto ko kasi yung kandidato na babad sa grassroots, yung kandidato na aware, yung kandidato na alam mo yon, alam yung nangyayari sa realidad ng Pilipinas at ng mga Pilipino, kaya kaya niyang magsalita at makipaglaban kasama sila. Parang as simple as what we've heard in the news before, di ba? We've been clamoring for mas maayos na public transportation. Tapos yung mga politicians, they're not listening because they are not even using the public transport, di ba? Parang alam mo yan, we need candidates who are from the masses and who represents these sectors na talagang babad at alam yung pinanggagalingan ng mga tao enough for them to fight para sa mga taong ito.
Siyempre ayaw natin yung the aircon lang parati, di ba? Actually,
Yes.
parang yun nga yung recurring na joke siya. Pero I think dapat totoo din siya. Like, someone should know kung magkano yung average fare, ano yung minimum na pamasahe sa jeep, or kung magkano ba yung mga rides sa MRT. Sir John, nasabi mo kanina na may pessimism ka, pero I think you're very much hopeful. Kasi like, yun nga, despite seeing all the chaos of Philippine politics through the decades, right? Like, you're someone who still fights and someone who still believes in the democratic process, obviously. So what do you personally hold dear when you're choosing a leader for during the elections?
Before I answer that, Bea,
Yeah.
I want to respond to a point Janina raised. I completely agree, and in fact, it's my paramount value. Integrity is very important. But I want to separate integrity from the value of authenticity, at least as I understand it. So Duterte, for instance, part of the reason why his supporters like him is because he says things like, looking at a dead Australian missionary who was gang raped, would say things like, sana si Mayor ang nauna. That's not integrity.
Right.
And yet, that's authenticity. People will say, oh, see, totoong tao. Or when the president says, alam mo, dati nangurakot ako pero naubos na. Okay? And his supporters like that, as they say in Bisaya, lami kay pamation. I mean, so he's so different because he says the truth, parang ganon. Ano? But in fact, while he's being authentic, he's not displaying integrity, and I think that's a real shame. That's a real shame, and I think many people are now responding to that, and that's what we're looking for in the next set of leaders. Real integrity, not just authenticity. So I completely agree with Janina's point. I just wanted to separate it from the virtue of authenticity. But back to your question about whether I'm still optimistic. Well, we have no choice but to be hopeful. Um, well, it took me some time to accept that the movement of history is not linear but cyclical. 30 years ago, we were fighting the Marcoses, and we were part of a generation that ousted them. And 30 years later, we are here again. They're again trying to gaslight an entire country. Jaime Marcos calling Leni Robredo an extraordinary housewife. Almost the exact same thing that her father used to describe Cory Aquino. It took me some time. Honestly, that one was a little dark. But once you accept that history is not necessarily a straight line, but it runs in circles, then we know what to do, right? So we want to secure the next cycle of history on the side of democracy. Okay, so I've been promising through Twitter that I have a 4-point checklist. So maybe this is the right time. I'm actually just borrowing the 4 key indicators of 2 scholars, Levitsky and Ziblatt, in their book How Democracies Die. And so I have 4 questions. So the leaders I'm looking for must not say yes to any of the 4 questions. Will they cut down on civil liberties? Expand libel laws, crack down on Rappler or ABS-CBN. That's 1. Will they encourage violence? Do they have ties with death squads? Or do they approve, even just through their use of language, deploying violence against people and institutions they don't support? That's 2nd. The 3rd question is, will they reject democratic norms? No, knowing that elections are important, you do not try to shortcut the process by declaring a revolutionary government or martial law. And then lastly, and I think this is very important, will they deny the legitimacy of critics and opposition? Right? Demonizing a simple, the teacher in Bataan, who said something about Duterte, and my God, I think the NBI tried to file 2 cases against him, and so on and so forth. Will they delegitimize someone like opposition Senator Laila de Lima to the point of inventing this whole sex video scandal? If there was a real sex video, where is it? Of course, you cannot show it because there's none, right? But it was used to demonize her. So those are 4 questions. And if your candidates will say yes to any of the 4, that's a red flag. Drop those candidates.
That's a very direct and easy guide. And I think it speaks of a larger phenomenon globally. Itong the rise of populism, yung pag-degrade ng democratic values all over the world. Right. And for better or worse, we have a chance to, not follow the trend or not go further in that trend in the 2022 elections. To bring up na rin ni Sir John nga yung harkening back to martial law. One major issue that we're facing in the 2022 elections, actually ngayon pa lang, di ba? Yung the distortion of history. And I think Janina has a lot of experience on that because it's I don't wanna minimize what you did, but it shouldn't be brave for someone to do a video about martial law. But in the current online environment, it is quite brave, diba? For someone to come out and like speak of facts, right? So how did you prepare for that, Janina? What motivated you to do that vlog about martial law? And how did you prepare for it?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you that it shouldn't be a special thing for some vlogger to release something like that. People always try to set me apart. And automatically because I made that video, suddenly I Janina for president 2050, and I'm like, okay, calm down, because I feel like the values and the principles that I held when I made that video, they're not only for politicians, they're not only for future public servants, but I feel like I was simply doing my duty as a Filipino citizen, and that's all. But yes, I did a video on martial law because because of the fight for historical revisionism, against historical revisionism. And it was a hard pill for me to swallow when I realized that the heroes, or I guess what we're fighting for, in terms of the truth, we have always been simply reactionary towards fake news. In a sense that pag may lumalabas na fake news, dun lang tayo magsasalita. Pag may nangyaring masama sa news or sa bansa natin, dun lang tayo nagsistand up. And I'm not anyway. I'm sure I know that there's so many activists and so many people who are doing this 24/7, and I acknowledge them 100%. But in terms of even me, like judging me, it took a historical revisionist vlog for me to post my own, where I feel like if we hold so much importance to truth, we should be at the front lines already with the truth before fake news can even come. Because then if we have already covered the grounds, like every inch of the Philippines with facts, with what is true, with what is real, then fake news wouldn't even stand a chance. And yet it does, because we always come right after, we always only react. And so I made the martial law video, and it was a very interesting process because it was a lot of studying. It was a lot of research, because there's so many different stories. There's so many different testimonials, and and not saying that none of those are valid, because we find people on the other side of history who are saying this was the time that I paid the least amount for the vegetables that I had in my community, or like my rent was low, or my area was peaceful, and those are valid.
Yeah.
But so are the data. So is the numbers of the people who were tortured, killed, who disappeared. We have the Reparation Act for a reason. You can't say that these things didn't happen when our literal law, and even Duterte extended this validity from 2014 to 2018, I think. And so I needed to get those out there, alongside stories, alongside experiences. We needed to see what history really was, because the basic quote, those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. And that's when I really went through all of the articles, all of the journal articles talaga. And then even then I submitted my video to lawyers, to economists, to people who could fact check me, make sure everything was credible, because I don't want to be a peddler of fake news either. And so it was a long and hard battle, and it's not over.
Ang ganda, healthy skepticism even towards your own research.
Even towards your own, yourself.
Yeah.
Because even me, I already have the narrative I want to share.
Mm-hmm.
I already know what kind of end I want, what kind of voice I want. And so I needed to be even me. Yeah, I needed to judge myself and break myself, like tear myself apart also. Right. My own video.
Right. You made a really interesting point before we went on air kanina, that because I was joking that you can't prepare for the vitriol that inevitably comes, diba? When you talk about martial law nowadays, for some reason automatic trigger yan, inaaway ka ng kung sino-sino. How did you prepare for the flood of hate that I'm sure that came your way when you released that video?
Well, this is my process for anything, because anything I say now is controversial apparently. Regardless, it could be mental health, it could be women empowerment. When an influencer opens her mouth, somebody's gonna say something. But I always ask myself, I always tell myself first, Janina, you are going to get hated on. And then I always ask myself, is it worth it? Those are the two things that go through my mind. Okay, what's, and it's really processing what's the worst thing somebody could ask you, what's the worst thing that could happen. I was ready to be red tagged. Like I was.
It's a little sad, no, na parang part na rin yan sa checklist
It is.
of the preparations that you have to make. Just because you want to release a video about martial law. Anyway, you were
Yeah.
saying.
It is. I mean, they will. I knew they would call me a communist. I knew they would call me a murderer. And so I had to prepare myself for the worst. But every single time I ask myself that question, okay, Janina, is it worth it? The answer is always yes. Because I knew that years from now, I would regret choosing my own comfort zone over giving a voice to the voiceless.
Right.
I would regret, choosing my own privilege over the rights of my fellow Filipinos. And so before I say anything in public, I always make sure that this is truly what I believe in and that it's worth standing up for. And so that's solidifying the facts behind everything. That's solidifying the stories behind everything. That's solidifying even your heart, your intentions behind it. Is it only so that I could trend? Of course not. Yeah. If I wanted to be rich and famous, I would stay in beauty. But it's really processing every single thing before it happens. So then, getting trolled and bashed on every single thing that I post now isn't so bad because I should have been red tagged in a sense.
That is an interesting way to look at things. Borge, marami rin tayong viewers actually dito or kasama natin sa Zoom who are young, who are of your generation and Janina's generation actually. Na kumbaga namulat kayo, may internet na disclaimer, millennial pa lang naman ako, pero na-experience ko pa yung time, kinukwento ko kay Janina kanina, na-experience ko pa yung time na encyclopedia pa lang yung only source namin kasi dial-up pa lang yung internet at hindi pa siya reliable back then. So yung for the generation, namulat kayo with hyperconnectivity as the norm. Like, how do you make sense of all this information that comes your way and including the disinformation, right? And how does this shape the way that you see the elections, the way that you see the world? Oh, March?
Hello, Bea.
Yes.
Sorry, I just caught. Naputol ako.
Sorry. Did you hear the question?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry. Medyo maulan.
It's okay. Because I was saying, diba, parang a lot of our viewers here are of your generation and of Janina's generation, right? Like you guys grew up where hyper connectivity was the norm na kumbaga. How do you think that's affected the way that you learn and absorb information, especially in the context of the 2022 elections?
Okay. Ako personally, I just don't rely sa sa social media because basically parang meron pa din kaming point of our lives where we rely mostly on books and like historical textbooks. Pero I think like in the context of martial law, hindi naman talagang dissected properly sa mga textbooks natin. No? But I think how it affects us, especially our generation, nagiging heavily reliant kami tayo sa social media actually. And then we often think na yung social media, yung parang primary source natin of information and that everything that is in social media is factual. I've heard a lot of friends telling me na because they've watched it or they've read it on social media coming from just a personal Facebook account, ay pinaniniwalaan na nila na tama. And unless you tell them the truth, unless you share to them relevant and legitimate sources, they wouldn't believe you. And they would still be trapped in that perspective na what they have read, even though they didn't fact check, is the truth. How it affects the elections? The politicians are using it for their advantage to revise history and to channel these disinformation and misinformation to construct a mindset in the Filipinos na ito sila at ito yung dapat na napaniwalaan ng mga tao about them. And that creates a narrative na false at hindi totoo. Na if hindi ka magkakaroon ng effort to really look deeper and read a lot of other articles, mahuhulog ka dun sa bangin na ito, matatrap ka dito at maniniwala ka na ito talaga siya kahit hindi siya ito. And yun yung malaking effect nito sa 2022 elections. We believe they are these people, but basically and technically they are not.
Yeah. And it doesn't help that the algorithm, yung ganda ng metaphor mo kanina, yung bangil, sorry, Bisaya ako, hindi ako magaling mag-Tagalog words minsan. Yung pit of disinformation, the algorithm makes it easier, makes that the norm actually, sadly, no? Ito na, Sir John, yung pinakamadaling tanong to condense. Kasi we were talking, di ba, of disinformation, like Janina was sharing kanina about how parang you almost expect to be red tagged just because you want to talk about martial law, right? How do we fix this? This disinformation, this broken world that we're in right now?
Well, first of all, hats off to Borge and to Janina for what they're doing. It's very important, and they're attacking this whole information disorder from different approaches, which I think should be the case. I think we can think of disinformation as an entire system, as an entire messaging system. So we can focus on the messengers who are the ones propagating fake news and other forms of organized disinformation. We can focus on the messages. What are the deep stories or the underlying narratives that these disinformation campaigns are trying to spread? We can also focus on the media and the social media networks. So, giant organizations like the New York Times, but also and especially the platforms like Facebook and YouTube. We can also focus on the audience. It's a little unfair, actually, when we think about how much of the burden has been placed on the audience. When we do fact-checking workshops, we're saying, okay, the audience bears the burden. So I wanted to approach this, first of all, from a more complete picture, right? So we need to put pressure on Facebook and Google, right? We need to put pressure on the messengers. So when you have these campaigns bringing out obvious lies, we need to call them out, right? My own focus has been on the messages and on the audience. On the messages part, if you'll allow me, I'll share a link. No, so this information report on some Asian countries includes a chapter that I wrote on the Philippines, and I focused on the messengers and on the messages, and I identified 5 key messages that are being pushed behind these disinformation campaigns. And one of the key messages there is that EDSA was a tragedy. So you have many stories, and they're actually all linked to that narrative that the last 30 years was the mistake. So that would be one. Another one, and I find this very interesting, is that the only politician worth supporting is Duterte. So even his political allies, depending on the issue, get hit by his own people, by his own social media campaigns. So Cayetano, when he was Speaker of the House, the Cayetanos would not be anywhere without ABS-CBN. But because of Duterte, they decided to change and pushed against ABS-CBN. But when Cayetano made the mistake of saying maybe we can extend their franchise for a few months until December 2020, there was an organized campaign, literally nakalagay, banatan si Cayetano, no? Led by Banat Bay, one of the main influencers on the side of Duterte. So those are 2 of the 5 messages that I identified. There must be more. So I think it's important for us to be able to classify certain types of fake news or disinformation content and say, okay, this is the story that's a part of. This is the template. Yung sa audiences naman, I think we can think in terms of 3 stages. How to be better readers or viewers or users. So yung tinatawag na critical reading, no? So that's the fact-checking part, learning to verify, and so on. The second stage would be what we can call critical thinking. No? We are aware of the cognitive biases that we have, confirmation bias, and so on and so forth. And then the third level, I think, is the most important one. Is, for lack of a better term, we can call we can call it critical feeling. No? How to be better feelers. Why? Because this information really works best when it pushes our emotional buttons. Rage, anger, envy, hate. Those are very powerful triggers. And we need to be more mindful of how we feel about certain things. Sometimes it's a question of identity. So anyway, those three levels, it's part of something I'm working on, which I'm calling MCU, media critical use or critical usage. So that's related to the audience part, but again, the audience is just one of the things. Like, I'm sorry, I'm talking too long, but I just want to end this by going back to what Borge and Janina said. So what Janina said, she did this video on martial law and then had it checked by lawyers, by economists. I mean, that, I wrote a book on Rizal once. That reminds me of what Rizal did. When he wrote his notes to Morga, he asked his great friend, Ferdinand Blumentritt, please write the foreword. But kung may mga mali ako, please point them out. Diba? I mean, that kind of attitude na parang what's more important is the truth, not my ego or anything. I just thought that it was worth pointing out that was, wow, that's, you have some process there, Janina. And of course, what Borge is doing, working with the grassroots, yun talaga, yun ang, that's where the battle will be won.
Yeah, we have a question. I have something to say about that also later, but we have a question muna from the Zoom, I believe. How important is educational attainment in choosing the right candidate? And what other attributes should we focus or watch out in a candidate? Is the heart of a public servant just enough to run for office? Siguro, let's focus muna on the first one. How important do you think is educational attainment when choosing the right candidate? Or does it matter at all?
Can I start?
Borge, go ahead.
Okay, I think it matters. The educational attainment really matters, especially when we're talking about the national elections. Kasi all the decisions that will be made by our elected officials will affect us directly and indirectly, yung buhay nating mga Pilipino. No? It's important because karamihan ng mga ginagawa, especially for example in the Senate, their job is to create laws, diba? Gumawa ng mga batas. If wala kang background on creating laws, medyo mapag-iiwanan ka, hindi ka makakapag-function well. So your educational attainment or your educational background in that certain capacity could actually help you maximize yung kaya mong gawin at i-offer sa bayan natin. So I think it matters. Educational attainment really matters.
Janina?
I do agree with Borge. I think it's if you're running for mayor, kailangan may higher education ka, diba? Or at least high school. Pag president, it's read or write. Yun yung credential na kailangan mo, which I think is very interesting because you think that running an entire nation would need a little bit more credibility in terms of education than running a city. And I do agree with Borge, because how can you write policies if you don't understand how the laws work, how to write a law? How can you serve a system if you don't even know how the system works? My only apprehension when it comes to putting that on when talking about educational attainment is that I hope that as we maybe add that as a standard, we also work twice as hard on making it a little bit more accessible for Filipinos. Because yun nga, puso importante, servant leadership importante. But there are many servant leaders who don't have that access to higher education, who don't have that. And so masasayang yung potential nila. Masasayang yung puso nila to serve the Filipino who know the people but do not know yet the law and lawmaking. And so I feel like those two have to go hand in hand. But I am definitely for having that knowledge before being the representation of the Filipino people, before representing the Philippines to the entire world even, because right now yung nakita ng mundo, tayo yung bansa na may EJ case, tayo yung bansa na greatest robbery of government sa Guinness Book of World Records. Yun yung nakita nila. And so of course we have to allow the best of the Filipino, the goodness of the Filipino to shine as the representation, as they are on that platform, and not just. So I agree with Borj, but I think those two are raising the accessibility is very important as well.
So siguro to add to Borj's point also, hindi naman kailangan, parang yung kakayanan at yung intellectual capacity, hindi naman siya nalilimit ng literal na degree. Like, hindi naman, porket may BS something ka, AB something ka, or MA or whatever, or kahit PhD pa yan, that doesn't automatically say that you have the skills for lawmaking, for instance. I think parang point din ni Borj kanina about kakayanan, di ba? Yung capacity din to learn, ideally, before you run for office, nag-aral ka na kung ano ba yung trabaho ng isang senador or ng isang congressman or kahit city council, ganun, di ba? So anyway, just wanted to add that. Sir John?
I think we need to make a distinction between constitutional requirement and our own personal set of qualifications or criteria. I think the reason the Constitution has a very low barrier to entry for a position like the president is that's the democratic ideal, right? I mean, we should not let the lack of a college degree get in the way of, let's say, a really talented, charismatic labor leader who may be the next Nelson Mandela, right? I think that's the philosophy behind it. But of course, as Borj and Janina pointed out, it's the year 2021 or next year, 2022. I mean, there are very complicated issues out there. We need someone who can understand them, and not only understand them, but actually take the lead on some of them. Does this mean that they need to have like PhDs or at least finish college? I think it's personal. It's up to each one of us. I think it's important. I think it's more important to have a leader who is able to work with the best minds in the country, right? I mean, I think that would be best. I mean, Marcos was an incredibly intelligent man. Did very well in university and then in law school. And look what he did to the Philippines, right? So it's education attainment by itself is not, I think, the answer. I think what's even more important is a person. What was it that historian Doris Kearns Goodwin said about Lincoln? Lincoln was able to form what he called a team of rivals because he thought that these rivals of his were the best people to place in his cabinet. So yung ganong klaseng approach, a leader who is not too egocentric as to think that he must be the smartest person in the room, a person who can work with the best and the brightest, and really do have great talent in the Philippines. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Actually, magandang point yun, sir, yung look at the, kumbaga the team that person may assemble. We discussed that actually in a previous episode about the presidency. Na bukod sa pagtutok sa mismong kandidato ng pagkapangulo in that specific instance, we need to observe sino ang campaign team, sino ang mga advisors, sino ang pumapaligid sa taong to. Kasi more or less, yun yung bibit-bitin niya sa Malacanang, pumanalo na siya. And that says a lot about, balik tayo sa mga checklist din, mga nabanggit natin na values kanina, it says a lot about the character of the candidate, like what kind of people are advising him for the economy, for social policy, for COVID-19, for example. Ganun. So parang dagdag kaalaman lang din na parang that's another thing that voters should look at, hindi lang yung mismong kandidato pero i-widen natin yung perspective natin, tingnan natin kung sino mga bumubulong sa kanila. And I don't mean that in a malicious way, like literally who are the people shaping the campaign and who are the people helping that person, the candidate, shape his or her policies.
So, Bea,
Yes.
sorry, to add lang then, I
Yes,
agree
yes.
with Sir John then, and I want to point out then that educational attainment does not guarantee good leadership.
For sure.
So that's for sure, because we've seen a lot of politicians na napakaganda ng credentials, napakaganda ng educational backgrounds, but once their values and principles are twisted with their political biases or like political advancements that were offered to them, they turn their backs sa mga Pilipino at inuuna ang kanilang personal interests. So I think ayun nga, it goes hand in hand with your passion to serve, your educational background. Kailangan natin ng kandidato na merong complete package.
Yeah. My next question will be about the differing views or our differing views, because we do have different values, everyone, the electorate. Pero mga thrice na ata to tinanong sa chat and maybe on Facebook and YouTube also. Feel free to weigh in if you're comfortable. Pero there is recent debate over vote buying triggered by Vice President Leni Robredo's answer sa isang forum, I believe that yesterday lang. Siyempre nag-weigh in na yung iba't ibang presidential candidates, also even Comelec. Also, the Comelec spokesman at least had a statement on that. What is the question? Sorry, I was giving the background. What are your thoughts now on that notion na accept the money but vote according to conscience?
Ako siguro, Bea, I'll start because I've experienced it firsthand sa barangay din. So, actually, I have the same sentiments with VP Lenny when she said that tanggapin yung boto. Because I'm coming from the perspective na it's easy to say it's easy to say sa mga tao not to accept the money na binibigay sa kanila and just like neglect it when we are talking inside our privileged bubble. Na for us, pwede kasi may sinasahod tayo or may kinikita tayo. But for them, it could be a meal for a day or for their families, di ba? So I think instead of holding it out to the people, dapat mas i-hold out natin na accountable yung mga bumibili ng boto mismo. Kasi nasa kanila yung mas malaking chunk of responsibility eh. Bakit hinahayaan ng sistema natin yung ganitong sitwasyon na marami pa rin nag-vote buying? Bakit despite the realities that it's happening in many times sa mga elections natin, wala pa rin nakukulong sa vote buying, wala pa rin actions na talagang nati-take further para matakot yung mga politiko na mag-vote buy. So I think nandun siya dapat sa sistema na yon na why do we let's not blame the people, but for me my take is that yes, accept it kasi it's so idealistic to say siguro we'll get there years from now, but for now yun talaga yung realidad na meron tayo ngayon.
Parang sa disinformation lang din yan, na parang kailangan mo rin mag-zoom out na hindi lang yung mga ordinaryong tao yung singilin mo, kumbaga kailangan yung institutions din, 'di ba, yung social media networks, yung politicians who are also, benefiting from disinformation as well. Do you guys want to add to that? Okay. The last question that we'll ask now, itatie-in ko na lang din sa may nagtanong si Debrito Yumi Tamayo. I'm not sure if your name is in the correct order here. Should one consider another person's political compass pagdating sa friendship, or I guess parang factor ba sa friendship yung political sway ng tao? And I think yung backdrop nito na tanong ay, yun nga, at the end of the day, like we do have different values with different people. Does it make them wrong or does it make us better than them sometimes? Diba? Parang, although ganun kasi yung narrative sa social media, I have better values than you do. So how do you look at, you have this checklist, you're heading out into the world, engaging with people. How do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with friends? I know family members who have sometimes radically different values than you do in life, and as it reflects on the elections as well. So, paano ba? How do we engage with our family, friends, and circles na hindi naman tayo masisira in the process? Janina?
Well, first, I have a lot of people on my Facebook wall na sobrang polar opposites din po sa beliefs ko. And a lot of the times, I want to unfriend, I want to unfollow, gusto ko na silang i-block, kasi medyo parang nagiging toxic na yung feed ko. But again, as I mentioned a while ago, ayoko rin maging close-minded.
Yeah.
But second, I don't want to give up on them also. Because I feel like or the comment that you read a while ago, we really have to normalize changing your mind. We have to normalize accepting that, okay, maybe I made a mistake in 2016, maybe I made a mistake in 2019, but now I know, and I think we have no right to take away that second chance from anybody, especially because even if we take away that second chance, they're still gonna have a vote in 3 years, in 6 years. So what does our unfriending actually do for the nation, except perpetuate even wrong decisions being made? And so I try not to unfollow, or no, I have not unfollowed, I have not unfriended. However, I feel like a political disagreement is very different from a disagreement on the human dignity.
Right.
And human rights. That's very different to me. Because the first one, maybe we're all working towards the common good. We just have a different idea of what the common good is. And that's fine. Again, democracy. Again, that's, parang the wonderful relationship of unity and diversity at the same time. But when it's talking about human rights and the dignity of the Filipino, and whether or not it's people are collateral damage, or whether or not these people should get justice or not, I think that's not so much a political debate than a showing of your character. And so that doesn't for me become a political disagreement, but that would entail me maybe putting under a microscope what kind of a relationship I have with a person who has a very different character than me, who has a very different beliefs than me in terms of, again, the value of human life, where for me, that's a non-negotiable. Life matters. Life is life. There's, you can't add, you can't subtract to that. That's what I believe in. That's my deal breaker. And so then maybe I would think about it. I would consider how close I am, because also you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Right.
That's just the principle, where, okay, if you're spending that much time with this person, or they're spending that much time with you, what does that also say about you? So there's a lot of that. And but in terms of, they can debate nicely and respectfully to you about why they're voting for this candidate, at may mga facts rin sila, may mga they can present real reasons why they deserve to be president or senator, then 100% wonderful. Then that's great. Let's have a healthy, discourse. But again, human rights is a non-negotiable for me.
Right. Mahirap makipagkaibigan kung yung core ng values niyo iba. Iba naman yung electoral politics.
Exactly.
I think that's what people should also understand, na iba yung politics sa electoral politics. Kung magkaiba yung values niyo, maybe it's fair to reevaluate your friendship or relationship. Pero sana naman kung same pa rin yung values niyo, tapos iba lang yung manok niyo or yung gusto niyo manalo, hindi naman siguro. Baka may space pa para magkaintindihan. Borge?
Actually, same din ang sinabi ni Janina kanina. May mga non-negotiables din talaga ako. And diba I don't know if it's in the Bible na parang bad company corrupts good character. So talagang sa akin, sobrang nagmamatter yung values ng mga friends ko and even the people in my closest circles. And I think, yes, we may differ when it comes to political compasses, political perspectives on how we get to a more peaceful, to a more inclusive Philippines. But yun nga, yung mga things, yung mga non-negotiables, yun yung mga hindi pwedeng i-compromise. Kasi minsan iniisip ko, for example, kapag may isa akong kaibigan na okay lang sa kanya yung martial law at yung red tagging, for example, naniniwala siya na that's completely okay. Iniisip ko na once mangyari sa akin yun at ako yung hulihin, wala lang para sa kanya. Parang I'm putting it at that perspective na what if it happens to me? 'Di ba? We don't need to become apathetic na hangga't hindi nangyayari sa atin na hindi tayo magkakaroon ng concern for that certain thing. And that speaks volume about our moral compass, our values as a person. And that reflects kung sino ka bilang isang tao, yung choices mo na yon. So we may agree na hindi masarap ang pizza sa Hawaiian, ang pineapple sa pizza. But when we talk about human rights, like what Janina said, non-negotiable yon. Hindi ako pumapayag talaga na may kaibigan ako na naniniwala na pwedeng maging presidente ang magnanakaw, ang mamamatay tao, ang hindi rumerespeto sa karapatang pantao. Those are non-negotiables for me.
Sir John, bukod sa Hawaiian pizza, how do we
For the record, I like pineapple on pizza.
Same. I do like pineapple on my pizza.
Okay. So I think Borge is going to cancel me now. Well, actually, I thought that what a terrific and provocative last question. Two quick points. First, I think it's a personal decision for each of us to decide what are our non-negotiables, right? Obviously, it's harder to let go of someone when that person is a part of our family or part of our work environment, right? So it's friends are different because it's mostly choice. What happens if you're close to someone who you did not choose, no? But circumstances made that person close to you. So it's a personal decision. It's really up to you whether Hawaiian pizza is the threshold or not. But I think the second point I wanted to make was that I was really struck by this question because we did not ask questions like those when I was your age back in the 80s. I think we did not have the specter or the sword of cancel culture at that time. And I think it's very real now. I've been asked questions like those. I mean, so it's not just, okay, so we don't agree on the same presidential candidate. We're not going to talk forever. It's something else. I mean, a real friend, that's, each person, each friend has an archive of memories that you share with, right? And when you cancel that, then you can no longer access those memories with that person. So I was actually struck by the fact that question was raised. That shows us that politics has been so polarized that we ask questions like, so what if we don't agree on our presidential candidate? Are we not going to be friends anymore? It's sad, in a way, and I guess it's the problem is amplified because of social media. I mean, people get into all sorts of terrible fights on Twitter and they don't even know each other, right? So what more when the fight is between friends who've known each other for years? It's really sad. I don't have an answer to that. I just wanted to end by saying I was really struck with that question. It's like, wow, that's a sign of the time. That's a sign of our historical moment.
Yeah, I know. I think it's something that we'll need to grapple with in the coming months. Lalo na palapit ng May 9. Ngayon pa nga lang medyo nasa level 90 na ata yung emotions ng mga tao, especially on social media. What more the day before the elections or the week leading up to the elections. For those who left questions, sorry, we can't ask them anymore, but you can try to engage with our guests on social media because for better or worse, we are all on social media. Thank you again, Borge, Janina, and John. I think that was honestly one of the best discussions we've had on PH Vote Dialogues. If they want to engage with you further on social media, which accounts can they follow? And where can they ask you questions? If, kung kailangan nila ng advice, kung ano ba, pineapple, joke lang. If they need guidance and if they want to engage with you on more questions about the 2022 elections. Janina, I think most people know your handles, but tell them anyway.
Yeah. Well, you can just follow me on Janina. Janina Velas, my username. That's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, everywhere. Honestly, that's just it, Janina Velas. So, yeah, I hope we can talk about these things. You can check out my martial law video as well. I saw people were asking about that. That's on my YouTube channel. So you can check that out. I'm still working on part 2 where we have a little, again, I don't want to rush it because I don't want to be a fake news peddler. So we're working on it, but it's coming out soon.
Sir John, including your newsletter.
You can get in touch with me at username Janina Bella. She will filter everything. No, I'm on Twitter at jnery, JNERY _newsstand, NEWSSTAND. I also have I just started a new newsletter where I try to integrate everything that I do. It's called Political Animal. And lastly, you can find the link to that as well as almost everything that I've written on my 16-year-old blog called Newsstand at johnnery.wordpress.com.
16. Wow. 2 taon na lang pwede na rin siyang bumoto, sir. Borge, your socials?
You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I am Carlo Bora. I also have a podcast called Tuesdays with Borgie. I tell stories with other young people about our contributions and sacrifices for nation building in the context of community development work.
Borge, baka naman kami ni Sir John pwede kaming guest sa podcast mo. As young people ourselves, di ba?
Yes,
Baka
please.
pwede mo na kaming ipila sa your podcast guest. I'm joking. Again, thank you, Janina. Thank you, John. Thank you, Borge, for guesting. Thank you for watching, everyone who watched on Facebook, YouTube, who are in this Zoom seminar. Kasi palapit na ng palapit ang May 9, 2022. I hope you're registered to vote by now. And I hope between today and May 9, you take the time out to research, engage, and research some more before you cast your votes. And I think isang key takeaway ko from this discussion is also having the humility and vulnerability when you, not just when you reach out to other people and engage with them, but also when you do your research. Kasi parang si Janina ata nagsabi kanina yun nga, parang be prepared also to be wrong and be humble enough to change your perspective when you're presented with new information. Some reminders from your friends here at Rappler. Bear with me, medyo mahaba-haba ito. Move PH, Rappler Civic Engagement Arm, also invites you to participate in the elections beyond voting. And here's how. You can help fact-check claims on social media during the elections and help debunk misleading information before they can shape public conversations. You can cover the elections by highlighting issues in your community and get training to be a citizen journalist who will be reporting election-related issues and initiatives in your communities. You can also lead a movement in your community. To get started on these, Move PH is launching #PH Vote Mover Summit training for citizen journalists ahead of the 2022 polls. This includes exclusive online training on fact-checking, covering local elections, and organizing projects for local communities. Deadline for applications is on Wednesday, November 3. That's next week. You can visit the URL that's being flashed on screen. I don't see the screen, pero naniniwala ako na naka-flash na siya. It's rplr.co/PH Vote Mover Summit. Cap sensitive, so nagtitiwala ako na may nagfa-flash on screen. Again, rplr.co/PH Vote Mover Summit. Rappler is gearing up to cover key areas around the country. You can help us do this by joining Rappler Plus. Visit rappler.com/plus. Since this is the final episode of PH Vote Dialogues, what a final episode. Ang dami tinapulot tonight. May pa-summary tayo. So here's a checklist loosely, but I think I've missed a few things based on our conversation today. So checklist ahead of the 2022 elections. Ask yourself, does that candidate give you space to dream, to hope? Check the candidate's history. So bukod dito sa track record niya, yung journey, yung kwento niya, paano ba siya napunta doon, paano siya narating sa posisyon na yon, kung saan man siya. Integrity, which should not be confused with authenticity. The capacity or yung kakayanan ng isang kandidato, yung mga prinsipyo niya, parang siguro yung isipin natin kung wala kang paninindigan, parang ang dali mong matangay kung san-san kung wala kang solid na base kumbaga sa mga beliefs mo, experience, yung track record, ako yung nawala sa sarili kong notes. General welfare. Ano ba to? Jen, tulungan mo ako. Looks after the general welfare of the public. Meron ding kanina na bring up yung hindi egocentric or siguro hindi lang sarili ang iniisip. Tas yung nabanggit ni Sir John kanina na kumbaga is democratic checklist. Kasi gusto nga natin, wag sana tayong matangay at wag sana tayong dumidire-diretso sa path, the global movement, away from democratic principles. And again, gusto ko lang ulitin, no, yung parang kasi yung discussion natin is our checklist for 2022 and ultimately how we'll engage with other people, the humility and vulnerability to engage and to be open to being wrong and to be open to hear other views. So yun lang for tonight. To our viewers, what's your checklist for the leader you'll vote in the 2022 elections? Tweet your answers or post a TikTok video. Hindi ko kaya to, pero I'm sure kaya nyo to. Don't forget to use the hashtag PHVote and hashtag WeDecide or tag us on Twitter at Rappler.com. We'll feature some of your answers on Rappler's social media account. So share tayo ng checklist. Baka may na-miss ako, baka may na-miss si Janina, si John, si Borge. So share tayo para by May 9, 2022 more or less, medyo buo na yung checklist natin. At actually, hindi lang buo yung checklist. Meron na tayong desisyon na pinag-isipan for the elections. Kasi tandaan natin, ikaw, dear voter, ang main character in the 2022 elections. This is our decision to make, atin ang Pilipinas. Learn more about the candidates in 2022 by visiting Rappler.com. You can follow us on social media. I think it should flash on screen. You can also follow our guests on social media. Mga binanggit nila kanina, will also include that probably in an article para hindi kayo ma-lost. If you want to engage with them further. Again, thank you sa mga lahat na nanonood sa Facebook, sa YouTube, dito sa Zoom. You have been watching the final episode of PH Vote Dialogues, and this has been Bea Copin for the last time. Good night, everybody. Thank you for watching. Bye! Salamat!